For the first time in 20 years, Rockland County will have a new county executive. Hello and welcome to another News 12 Vote 2013 election special. I'm Tim Cassidy. Tonight we are bringing you a special debate in that race. There are two people hoping to replace current Rockland County Executive Scott Vanderhoff, who has decided not to run for re-election this year. Over the next hour and a half, we will hear their thoughts on some of the major issues facing Rockland residents. Right now, we want to go ahead and introduce you to the two candidates. First, we want to welcome Republican County Legislator Ed Day. Mr. Day took office in 2006 and is also a security consultant with more than 25 years in law enforcement. He currently lives in New City with his wife of 32 years. Mr. Day has two grown sons and one grandchild. He is also running on the Preserve Rockland line. Welcome, Mr. Day.
Thank you.
We also want to welcome the Democrat running for Rockland County Executive, David Freed. Mr. Freed is a former judge in the village of Spring Valley and resigned from that position in 2012 in order to run for county executive full-time. He also has the support of the Working Families and Independence Party lines. Gentlemen, good luck to both of you today.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now we want to introduce you to the panel of journalists who will be questioning the candidates over the next hour and a half. First, from News 12 Hudson Valley is anchor and news director Janine Rose. Ms. Rose has been covering local politics and elections in Westchester and the Hudson Valley for more than 2 decades. Also with us tonight, Steve Possel. Mr. Possel covers political and social issues impacting Rockland on the Steve and Meredith Morning Show, weekdays on WRCR 1300 AM Radio Rockland. He has more than 40 years' experience on the airwaves. Also with us today is Ed Arace, the editor-at-large for HV Biz. The bi-weekly publication focuses on the economy, jobs, and other business issues throughout the region. Welcome to all our panelists today. Now, each of the candidates have been briefed on the ground rules. Earlier, the campaigns picked numbers to determine the order for opening and closing statements. Mr. Ed Day, we are going to start with you. You have 2 minutes for your opening remarks.
Okay. Thank you very much, Tim. I want to thank all of you for providing this forum for us so that people of Rockland can hear where we're going to be going in the future. As was said, my name is Ed Day, and frankly, Rockland is in a crisis. Rockland has been going in the wrong direction. I have been a part-time legislator, and for the last 5 years, I've been speaking and taking the appropriate action I could in order to redirect that. The time has come now to act as an executive, as a leader, to get us back where we have to be. I've been hearing a lot of political conversation and distraction. The issues are to focus on the crisis and provide solutions, of which I have 3 detailed plans that are on my website that will deal with the issues of the economy, the financial crisis in Rockland County, and preserving Rockland and our environment. I bring with me a wealth of executive and management experience from the public and private sector, and it comes in perspective of never having a full-time job in politics. What drives me to do this is a commitment born from deep involvement in my community. That includes being a civic association president, being involved in our not-for-profits, our schools, and also coaching our youth for 20 years. My desire to do this is driven by something that I believe has been lost. I call it the Great Promise. Our grandparents told our parents, and our parents told us with certainty that we could take it to the bank, that our lives would be better than theirs. We can no longer deliver that promise to our children. And what hurts me personally is that my oldest son, who has served this country in combat, has come home, and he cannot tell that to my grandson. And that hurts. So while I recognize as county executive you cannot wave a magic wand and fix things, it is critical as a leader of county government that you interject in as many areas as you can. And I believe very strongly that I'll be able to start to deliver, enable that great promise to be delivered once again to our young people. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Day. Now, David Freed, you will have 2 minutes for your opening statement.
Thank you, Tim, and thank you very much, News 12, for hosting us. And thank you, Mr. Day. Look forward to the debate this afternoon. First of all, I believe that people think that Rockland County is a wonderful place to live. It is a beautiful, great community with wonderful people. The problem is that our government is very much on the wrong track. Rockland County presently has a $128 million deficit, the lowest credit rating of any county in the entire state of New York. And just recently, the state comptroller independently ranked Rockland County as the most fiscally stressed municipality, not just county, town, village, city, any level of municipality. We are last. And I don't think that with the amount of taxes that people pay in this community, people deserve better than being last. And I look forward to serving you as county executive because I believe that people are desperate for a new direction in Rockland County. When you consider our fiscal crisis, when you consider rampant overdevelopment crisis in the East Ramapo School District, and a disengaged government that has really lost touch, I think that people really want to see something different in Rockland County, and they deserve to. I am a lifelong Rockland County resident, product of the public schools. I most recently served as a criminal court judge in the village of Spring Valley, which is one of the busiest courts in the entire state of New York. And serving as a judge was one of the greatest trainings that can prepare one to assume the office of county executive. Because as a judge, you have the unique experience to learn how to make responsible decisions made with integrity. I look forward to bringing that skill set to the county executive's office.
All right, thank you, Mr. Freed, and we want to get right to the first round of questions from our media panel. The first comes from News 12's Janine Rose. It will be directed to Ed Day, who will have a minute and a half to respond.
Thank you, Tim. Mr. Day, emergency service workers in Rockland have repeatedly expressed concerns about building code violations in the Hasidic communities of the county, notably Muncie, New Square, other parts of Ramapo. We've seen homes illegally subdivided, yeshivas built with code violations, and other projects in violation of the zoning and building codes. Yet traditionally, elected officials in Rockland have done nothing out of fear of losing the block vote support of the Hasidic community. If you're elected county executive, what, if anything, will you do to try to bridge that gap between the religious freedoms the community is entitled to and the real concerns about safety?
All right, thank you for that question, Janine. You know, first of all, let me be very clear. I bring an independence to this race that I believe solely I can bring. At this stage of my life, I am not beholden to anybody. This is not about religion or anything else. What this is about, an issue of slumlords, illegal housing, and the profit motive. That is what the issue is about. I've already introduced a 10-point plan called Preserving Rockland. A good deal of that, first of all, the entire plan has been vetted legally. There are a number of steps in there that I'm looking to take. And there was tremendous input from the Illegal Housing Task Force that we have in Rockland County. Some of the things that I'm going to implement is what they requested, a $7,500 per day per occurrence fine, $1,000 administrative fines daily if you fail to answer subpoenas after 15 days. I want to set up a separate county court because the reality is in Ramapo, what happens when you go to court, you don't get justice. And that's the problem. The fines that we are going to be levying for these kind of situations will self-sustain that court. We're going to look to amend Section 381 of the New York Executive Law in order to accomplish many of these things. But the one thing I will not countenance is watching families at risk and waiting for a tragedy to happen. That is unacceptable. As a former first responder, I believe I have a duty to ensure the safety of the people of this county, and I am not going to wait until we have a situation where a family who is in a legal housing area gets caught up in a fire and dies. I'm not going to wait for one of our heroic first responders to die before action is taken.
Thank you, Mr. Day. Mr. Freed, you're going to get the same amount of time, a minute and a half, on building code violations and concern about the block vote.
Okay. Well, first of all, I disagree with my opponent on how to handle this issue. The reality is that the plan that Mr. Day has proposed would take power away from the local municipalities and put the authority into the county government to deal with these issues. I believe that Rockland County residents want to see their local town and village develop and be controlled by the local community itself, and not to have a power grab for county government to take over. Instead, what I propose is that we should have a system that allows each municipality to know whether or not an individual has committed a code violation in a different municipality, so that we can have escalating fines for those that are recidivist offenders. So, for example, if you are in the town of Ramapo and commit a code violation, illegal housing or otherwise, and then you go to Congers, for example, and commit a similar act, there is no mechanism for knowing that the person has previously had an issue in another municipality. I would like to see a countywide system that would enable the local justice courts to know whether or not someone has engaged in illegal conduct in another municipality. The goal being to have significant enhanced fines for each subsequent offense. I think that that's the critical part, because when you're dealing with the slumlord, it's all about profit. And the reality is that these fines that we presently have are often just the cost of doing business, and it should really hurt. It should hurt. And the Office of Consumer Protection will be very engaged in making sure that when you, on first offense, it's a fine. Second offense, we pull your license.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Freed. We're going to go back to Ms. Rose, who now has a follow-up question for Mr. Ed Day only. Mr. Day, you'll have a minute to respond.
Yeah, Mr. Day, we've seen a similar culture clash in regard to the unreported crimes in the Hasidic community, notably sex abuse of women and children. Would you do anything to step up those law enforcement efforts as well?
I would use the ability I have as a former law enforcement executive to make the point with the Ramapo police that they have to. But also, I have to also speak about this issue with illegal housing, which is a criminal offense, frankly, in my eyes. With a county court, we have no need to have a cross-town documentation. We will have that automatically. Having enhanced fines is one thing, but the specific fines I laid out are in response to what the Illegal Housing Task Force feels they need. And let me be very clear. I'm a former Civic Association president. I would never, ever, ever compromise the ability of local government to provide their own zoning. We are not talking about zoning. We are talking about is responsible development that does not impact upon your neighbor. At that point, something has to be done. And this is where I look at the plans I put forth in order to address it. This is not something that will compromise local zoning. I would never do that. This is something that will address the issues that this county is facing that is not being addressed in many towns, but particularly in Ramapo.
All right, thank you, Mr. Day. Our next question comes from Steve Posel, I got it right this time, from WRCR 1300 AM Radio Rockland. This question will be for Mr. David Freed.
Thanks. In pursuing your remarks about the county's finances, Rockland put in a request to the state for a $96 million deficit bond to allow for it. It was approved by the legislature just before adjournment last June. 4 months hence, the governor hasn't signed it yet. Now, the county executive released his budget, or will this week, to the legislature with a presumption that that bond will be signed by the governor, that approval. Thus far, it hasn't. My question to you, rather simply, is if, by the time you take office, it hasn't been signed, what's your plan B?
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks, Steve. And I'll say to you that one of the biggest problems that Rockland County has is that it continuously bases its budgets on presumptions. Now, the deficit bond itself is not a silver bullet. The reality is that if you do not restructure the government, you're going to end up in a situation where you're taking on $96 million intended to fill the deficit, the gap that exists, and then you end up with debt on top of it. Now, if in fact you can restructure government, you have the opportunity to alleviate the issue. Now, I believe that you have to set an example. The reason that I have decided to run for county executive is to set an example and to lead by example. That's why on the very first day in office, I will cut my own salary by 20%. I will also evaluate every single administrative post and eliminate jobs that are not essential and combine positions that can be consolidated. The fiscal crisis that Rockland County's incumbent government has created is unprecedented, and it's not the type of situation that you can, fix by, cutting office supplies. This is going to require a complete restructuring of government. You look at the fact that there's a finance department, you look at the fact that there's an Office of Budget and Management. We have to do things differently because this county is completely unaffordable. However, we also must reinvest ourselves in economic development. The reality is that we have to bring new revenues into Rockland County without reaching further into the pockets of taxpayers.
Thank you, Mr. Freed. Mr. Ed Day, you will have a minute and a half to respond on budget and the deficit bond.
Great. Thank you very much. Steve, we've heard you speak about this many times before. The plan B here is that the issue has to be addressed. We can no longer continue to allow the deficit to grow. And the way we do that is twofold. I did not support the first deficit bond for a reason. I look at the deficit bond as something in a very narrow sense could help us from a cash flow perspective. It's not a silver bullet, which has been mentioned before. The deficit is, I liken it to a sick patient. You can triage that patient, you can stabilize that patient, but if you don't deal with what got that patient sick, that patient is going to get sick again. So I remember when we first had the $80 million bond, I said, I do not want to go back to the folks in my community and say in 2 years, we need $50 million more. Guess what? It's $47 million more. I have an expectation of efficiencies to be delivered by the administration. That has not been done. That's what I will do. I will restructure this government. I will bring in the personnel from within and outside the county to get that done so we can have a solid platform. From that point, you drive the economy with economic development. And the other piece of this is we're supposed to put $10 million aside every year if this bond is not passed. And the governor has not been fair to us. The governor has not taken action. I believe that to be a failing. 4 months he has had this bill. There is actually built into this bill an ability to provide oversight for county government, something I insisted upon. And the governor still has not signed it. I don't know why he is waiting. To me, it's an abdication of executive responsibility to let this community twist in the wind like it has been going on. But we have plenty. We have a lot of property, $250 million worth of property. I would look at that for potential one-shots to address the deficit.
Thank you, Mr. Day. Mr. Posel, you can now ask a follow-up question to Mr. David Freed only, who will have a minute to respond.
Do you foresee, in your term of office, the possibility that Rockland's finances could be taken over by a control board? And if your answer is yes, could you briefly explain the ramifications of a control board takeover?
Well, absolutely. And I don't think that Rockland County residents want their state comptroller to come in and take over the county because all decision-making, all that local control will be abolished. People deserve to have their local county government control the destiny of the county and not some other person that's distant out in Albany or some other place. But I have to say, I do believe that it can be fixed. My family asked me when I decided to run for county executive, they said, do you really want to be the captain of the Titanic? And my answer was, no, I want to be Captain Sully that landed the plane safe on the Hudson. But the reality is that this does not have to be a sinking ship. Absolutely does not. And the main issue here, and I want to disagree with Mr. Day on the issue of Governor Cuomo. I think that the governor is right. I think that the governor is waiting to see incumbent legislators like Mr. Day actually bring something forward to restructure this government. That's what he's waiting for. Because, again, if you just hand over $96 million without a plan, this government will have deficit and debt.
Thank you, Mr. Freed. We now want to go to our third panelist, Mr. Ed Arace from HV Biz. Mr. Arace, your question will be for Ed Day.
Mr. Day, public financing of campaigns has been suggested by some as a way to limit pay-for-play and corruption in Albany. Orange County recently passed a law limiting campaign contribution from people doing business with the county. Still others suggest the answer to good government is in term limits. If elected, would you champion a law that would set term limits for county executive and members of the county legislature?
Thank you. Thank you for your question. Probably the easiest one I'm going to get. For 3 years in a row, I have introduced term limit legislation for Rockland County government. It has not gone beyond committee. This is a frustration you have when you're a minority legislator. And that's okay. I think the issue is alive and well. People are allowed to go for a permissive referendum should they so desire. As county executive, I made it very clear. If I do win a second term, I will serve 2 terms only. And I tell people, frankly, if I haven't fixed this in 8 years, get somebody else anyway. That's to me, term limits is something that was envisioned by the Founding Fathers. They never fully addressed it because they called it rotation in office. There was never a need in their mind to worry about somebody being in government for 40 years. This is a post-World War II dynamic. And I believe to a great degree it has created a government that is not reflective of the people of this country, not just the county. So I firmly believe in term limits. I will implement it as a county executive for myself. I will reintroduce it as a county executive for elected officials. As I'm very, very strong in favor of the particular issue.
Thank you, Mr. Day. Mr. Freed, same question for you about term limits for the county executive and county legislature.
Sure. Well, I believe that term limits, any issue that deals with the nature of representation is something that the public should decide for themselves. The tool to do that is a permissive referendum. And I would not oppose at all legislation that would bring this issue to the public. Personally, I think that every 4 years or 2 years, depending upon the office, when a candidate is presented to the public, that's the opportunity for the people to decide. If the people of Rockland County decide to evaluate this issue and have their representatives look at it, I would be more than happy to support it. But anything dealing with the nature of representation, I believe, should sit within the hands of the people themselves. For example, I proposed several months ago to reduce the size of the Rockland County legislature. There are 17 legislators. I think we can do just fine with 11. The reality is that Westchester County has 17 legislators, and there are, the population in Westchester is about 3 times the size of Rockland. So I think that we can have individual legislators in Rockland County represent more people than they do now. Again, a cost-saving mechanism, sacrifice shared by all. But I present this example just to show that decisions affecting representation, my firm belief, should sit within the hands of the public.
All right, thank you, Mr. Freed. Mr. Arce, you will now have a follow-up question for Mr. Ed Day only.
In the absence of term limits, you can't get that passed, the ability of incumbents to raise money and their strong name recognition almost assures that they get reelected. Mm-hmm. What can you do to level that playing field for the challengers?
Okay, first of all, to be very clear, the bill for term limits would provide for the voters to make the decision. This is not a piece of legislation that would automatically make term limits in Rockland County government. All it would do would be put it on the ballot. I find it remarkable that my colleagues are afraid of that. Let the people decide. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying that Ed Day has the answers on this. I'm willing to argue and debate this issue in the public. You just hit a very good point, and it's been a narrative already. The fact of the matter is that some will make the argument that we get to vote every 4 years, every 2 years to remove people, to change office. But the odds are stacked. Incumbency is a strong help to anybody running for office. Not to mention, in fact, political parties who cut deals. We have had races in Rockland County where one candidate had 5 lines, and we had a third-party line with somebody running all by him or herself. That's not democracy, and it's not a fair fight. So I think a mix of campaign contribution laws would be helpful, but the term limit issue has to come simply to the voters, and that's all the legislation I propose would do.
Thank you, Mr. Day. Panelists, thank you for those questions. Right now, however, we want to hear from you, the local voter. This week, News 12 reporters asked people like yourself to pose a question for the candidates. Take a listen.
Hi, my name's Rob, and I live in Suffern. My question for the candidates are, how come the taxes keep going up and they keep cutting the school budgets?
Okay, David Freed, we're going to give you that question. 1 minute to respond about school budgets in the county.
Sure. Well, the reality is that Rockland County is a very expensive place to live. And I appreciate Rob's question from Suffern. And the truth is that I don't think that people care which tax bill they're getting. They end up getting a county tax bill, a town tax bill, a village tax bill in some cases, a school taxes, special districts. And the reality is that, one on top of the other, that's the main issue. I'd like to see an aggressive effort to examine opportunities for consolidation. I think that there has to be leadership, not just an administration of county government, but a county executive that can build partnerships with school districts, with town governments, with village governments, to figure out how can, what can we do to look at things like purchasing, the basic infrastructure of government that perhaps we can do together jointly and eliminate some of those expenses. But again, this is another reason that I think that you need someone who's going to really look at the full picture and not just the county government itself.
Thank you, Mr. Freed. Mr. Day, school budget question.
Okay, Rob, thank you for the question. Again, school budgets are going through the same problem that every budget's going through. We have every level of government, including the schools, looking within their own box. And when you do that, you do not have an ability to see beyond that. And that is really a major issue. We need to work together across entities in order to reduce the cost of government. I look at issues such as a highway department. Our highway departments of county and town go traverse the roads in snowstorms, lift blades up to plow snow. That's absurd. Law enforcement. We have a county sheriff's department. We have town departments, village departments. The one thing I can offer is an expertise and a background in law enforcement. And I recognize that law enforcement is the largest part of our town tax bill. I believe very strongly that we could probably have a better model where there's more interface between and among the different departments, where we can provide some savings for our town taxpayers. The problem is very simple. There's a fear on the part of elected officials to add something to their line because they run on that line. We have to have a collective approach to governance and a collective approach to taxation and services.
All right, Mr. Day, thank you. Hey, we are just getting started here, but we do need to take a break and pay the bills. So we'll be back in 2 minutes with more of our Vote 2013 election special right here on News 12.